My presentation is going to be about using metaphorical analysis as a design method for designing both visual and textual communications, particularly trying to reach those who aren't what I would consider part of the converted already. I'm going to start with a background and then move to the example of this method in action. I also understand why Elizabeth put me on this panel, because we're talking about composting. So basically, how do you make people, or how do people make choices about the information to which they will pay attention? Cognitive consistency theories that began in the 50s generally indicate that people will seek out information they expect to agree with. I'm assuming that you all are part of the sustainability movement here, so you're not who I'm really targeting. Contemporary social communication research also indicates that that's still true with our information-rich, web-based, Twitter-feeding world. And so how do we reach those who aren't converted, who aren't initially interested in the topics that we're talking about? Issues of persuasion enter into this picture when you understand that it's about the ideas of value. And we use metaphor into developing a framework of how we communicate. One needs to meet your target audience's mindset or values to begin to understand their ideas of truth and priority. From that understanding, one can begin to frame the conversation or the debate. For framing is about getting language that fits your worldview. And we use metaphors to highlight our expectations of our audience's mindset and values. So, for example, here we need a new alternative source of energy. Imagine saying that to someone who you think is a hawk. We might then imagine that listener. She might not think of renewable sources like the sun as being the first way to achieve this goal, but rather may think of military actions to protect foreign supplies. So based in 2004, popular work by George Lakoff, a linguist, he published an analysis of contemporary US politics using two opposing metaphors: strict authoritarian father versus the nurturing parent mindset or value system. And I want to say that I'm blithely using his framework in a very polarized manner. He, of course, uses it much more nuanced. No one is completely one mindset or the other. So this is one thing in terms of starting to use metaphors in terms of imagining your audience. Metaphors are extremely powerful in that they are used to, honestly, to bridge difference, to make analogies. But Lakoff and his partner, Mark Johnson, back in the 70s, I believe it was, wrote a book that was fundamental to the notion of conceptual metaphors and how they structure our present understanding and structure our future expectations. Some of those metaphorical constructs that they discussed have to do with orientational metaphors or container metaphors. The book that I'm referencing, which is standard, is Metaphors We Live By. These are the ones that I'm pulling out for this particular talk. So that's, again, another notion of how metaphors come into play. Finally, just to give audience time space to quote unquote the opposing side, I also cite Frank Luntz, who is the political consultant for the Republican Party, well known for creating powerful phrases such as tax relief versus tax cuts, exploring for energy instead of drilling for oil, and climate change rather than global warming. He also has words to talk about persuasion. He doesn't necessarily reference metaphors, but he does believe one must appeal to the emotions and values of the audience. And this is how you, quote unquote, win with winning optimism. So I'm going to get to the case study here. I had a junior class, undergraduate class of design students work on the issue of messaging, so to speak, composting, designing both textual, visual, and physical objects to persuade fellow students to compost and recycle. These students selected, after researching and observing, two sites on campus. One was JCL, which is Megan's territory, and the other one is actually this building, the SAC luncheon area downstairs. they decided they would use these two, and we had general discussions trying to reference both the work of Lakoff and Johnson and their analysis. So the general consensus in terms of looking at the word recycling was that while cycle was good, overall linear, again, orientational paired metaphors, was, especially when viewed as progress, was generally more desirable in the student mindset. They also decided that the contemporary terms of upcycle, pre-cycle, and post-consumer waste were, at best, neutral in terms of desirability, having too many negative aspects in terms of the orientational metaphors. And granted, these are students analyzing their own responses. Thus, for the JCL team came up in terms of, and I'm just speaking about their logo and textual studies, not their design of bins and objects. They came up with the phrase, feed the earth, it fed you first. They believed that JCL's audience was much more of the nurturing parent type. And so they leaned toward a cycling notion. But they also ended up developing a mark that, if you look at it, has a linear progress. I personally think that the one on the right actually is a stronger overall visual. So, interestingly enough, here we are with the orientational strict father values from Luntz and Lakoff, and the orientation of a linear or progressively moving forward visual form. For SAC, the phrase became release the potential. They viewed SAC, believe it or not, in this LEED certified building, falling more under the strict authoritarian father metaphor because there were no composting options available at the time. They came up with the phrase, release the potential, which, when applied and manipulating the traditional recycling logo, adds a level of linearity and a sense of progress that they believed would augment and reach the audience of the non-converted. It is interesting to note that they have added to existing systems using the cycle. I would also like to note that until recently, the plastics industry's sorting code symbol is oftentimes confused as meaning it is, on the consumer end, immediately recyclable. As we know, I think styrofoam has the symbol on it, but it's not necessarily recyclable, and this is a point of confusion. So again, this is sort of an interesting use of both form and metaphor, confusing the issue or persuading someone to believe it does something else. Finally, I'm just pulling forward some websites and phrases from existing organizations that deal with sustainability. You'll notice that they all build upon the powerful notion of the 3 Rs, expanding them to 4 Rs, 5 Rs, including lovely phrases such as reduce, recycle, reduce, reuse, recycle, and rot. The Castro Valley Sanitary District, which again makes perfect sense if you're already persuaded, but for someone who thinks composting might be stinky, it's not going to be very effective. And that's it. Thank you.